from the studios of Farm Journal Broadcast, this is AgDay.
Today on AgDay, you could call it a kind of cow paradise, while some are spending their days on a remote island. Strong reaction on both sides after the USDA announces it's moving 2 research agencies to the Kansas City area.
We're going to put out the welcome mat for you.
And Animal Rights Group releases another undercover video on Fair Oaks Farms. AgDay gets answers from one of the top veterinarians in the country.
I think anytime we review, or I review certainly these kinds of videos, I try to determine if there's willful or deliberate abuse.
AgDay, presented by the all-new Chevy Silverado, the strongest, most advanced Silverado ever.
Good morning, I'm Clinton Griffiths. A top veterinarian in the industry is weighing in on one of the undercover videos animal activists shot at the nation's largest dairy, Fair Oaks Farms. This video, released last week, was shot from a milking parlor and barn in northern Indiana. AgDay's Betsy Gibbon talked with the vet who went through the video scene by scene.
The Center for Food Integrity established an animal care review panel of top veterinarians to assess this undercover video and provide clarity of what's common practice and what's not. We had a discussion with one of the panelists, Dr. Jan Scheer of Iowa State University, to break it down. Dr. Scheer, what's your overall general observation when it comes to this particular video?
I did see some things that I think could have been done differently. I think there's some animal handling techniques that need to be improved. And I think there are some facility management issues that need to be addressed. But I did not see what I would consider willful animal abuse.
Moments after giving birth and after birth, still visible. Mothers are forced on the milking line.
In this video, we see a cow that looks as if it has some visible afterbirth in the milking parlor. Is that a general practice?
Yeah, this is very normal. We expect that cows, as soon as they calve, will most of the time within 12 to 24 hours release the placenta. But in some cases, they retain it. And when they retain the placenta, it may be retained for several days.
Dr. Scheer says all milk is tested for antibiotic residue before it hits the grocery store shelves. Milk from new mothers or sick cows are filtered out and will not enter the milk supply. We asked Dr. Scheer about the tail twisting too. He says it's a habit some may develop, but not the best practice.
I did not see in this situation what I thought was sufficient pressure or twisting to cause fracture of the tail, but I do believe that it is an animal handling issue that needs to be addressed in training. Twisting the tail can lead to fracture. It's the wrong way, really, to move an animal forward.
Cows are left to suffer and die slow, grueling deaths.
Do you think some of these shots of a cow lying on its own could potentially be from a maternity barn or from a hospital barn?
In both frames that I see, and these frames are very short, so it's hard to make a good, solid determination of what's going on. But I did notice a significant amount of abdominal pressing, which I would normally associate with an animal that is down and in the process of delivering a calf.
When it comes to an average dairy, is it common to strap on cows onto the milking parlor, and do they commonly slip in the parlor too?
One of the troubling things in the video is the fact that animals were slipping or going down in the stalls of the rotary. That's something that needs to be sorted out and determined what could be going on there. This is an animal that weighs 1,500 pounds, and you've got a gentleman there that probably 150 or 160 pounds trying to pull that animal backwards. It's a real task, and anyone who's done that knows it's very difficult to move an animal that is down in a situation like that.
I asked Dr. Scheer what the industry needs to do in the future with animal care training. He told me there needs to be more training, not just when it comes to animal care, but normal animal behavior.
All right, Betsy, thank you. An update to a story now that's been years in the making. The European Commission says it's reached an agreement with the United States to allow more hormone-free U.S. beef onto the European market. The Commission says the deal allows U.S. farmers to export 35,000 tons of beef, the increased tonnage to be phased in over 7 years. Now, it's a step toward ending a long-running dispute over EU beef import restrictions. The deal still needs to be approved by EU member states and the U.S. and then approved by the European Parliament. 2 senators from the Midwest are introducing a bill to reform the biofuel waiver program. The bill was introduced by Democrat Tammy Duckworth of Illinois and Republican Deb Fischer of Nebraska. It would create a June 1st deadline for refineries to apply for the waivers. The waivers allow refineries to be exempt from blending ethanol into gas. It would also require the EPA to report to lawmakers about how they decide whether a waiver should be granted. The USDA's plans to relocate the headquarters of 2 research agencies to the Kansas City area are intensifying concerns that research will suffer. Now, we told you about the move last week. Several ERS and NIFA employees stood with their backs turned to the Ag Secretary last week as he talked about relocating the agencies. The Union of Concerned Scientists says the move will drive off researchers, calling it, quote, a blatant attack on science. A union representing Economic Research Service employees called it cold-hearted. But officials in Kansas City say they are ready to welcome them.
Number one is I sympathize with these family changes. They're not easy to do. Many of us have been in that predicament at different points in our careers. So number one, I understand it. Number two, understand that first of all, we're going to put out the welcome mat for you. You all are going to be a big deal in Kansas City. We're delighted to have you and your families coming. Understand that Kansas City has a great, robust economy. We have a very strong and diverse agricultural, agribusiness economy. So for your spouses and family members who come along, we want to help them make connections as well. But also think about the quality of life. And I found when I moved to Kansas City from Washington, D.C. 20 years ago, what a wonderful quality of life. Your housing dollar is going to go almost twice as far. All of a sudden, you're going to have a reasonable commute to the office at a reasonable price, and you can go to your kids' ball games in the evenings. It's a nice thing.
The move expected to bring 550 jobs to the Kansas City area. In the field, Bayer, the makers of glyphosate-based Roundup weed killer, say it plans to invest some $5.6 billion over the next decade to develop new methods to combat weeds. The German chemical and pharmaceutical company making the announcement Friday. It follows current legal issues in the U.S., rulings in 3 separate cases in favor of the plaintiffs that claim the weed killer caused their cancer. Now, Bayer argues that studies have shown glyphosate is safe and continues to stand by the product. The company says this new announcement, however, shows it's committed to offering more choices for growers. Ag Vote 2020 is heating up as the Democratic presidential challengers prepare for their first debate at the end of the month. And a new Farm Journal Pulse poll shows President Trump remains a strong opponent out in farm country. The mobile phone-based Pulse survey getting responses from about 1,100 farmers. They were asked, quote, do you approve or disapprove of the way Donald Trump is handling his job as president? 50% say they strongly approve, while another 24% say they somewhat approve. In 5 surveys over the past year and a half, farmer approval ratings have been statistically the same. Corn and soybean markets spent much of last week trending higher on poor stands and field conditions. And in states like Missouri, farmers say it's the worst planting season condition-wise that they've ever seen. Continued cool, wet weather keeping farmers out of the fields for weeks at a time. Field work and fertilizer applications, they've been a slow go. Even in the areas that got planted, heavy rains forcing farmers to replant.
Typically, the field like this, I'd expect in the 170 to 190 range, and I'd be lucky if I could average 140. I think right now, if we have decent weather the rest of the growing season, which is always up in the area in Missouri. We don't get Iowa weather down here, so you never know. But if the corn rallies, you don't need as many bushels to make up the difference. And soybeans are just too cheap to put beans out there, really.
USDA says just 27% of Missouri corn is good to excellent, 45% is fair. The new crop progress report is due out later today. School is finally out for summer, as meteorologist Cindy Clausen shows us in today's crop comments. Cindy.
Well, Clinton, it's almost become a rite of passage for farm kids, driving the tractor to school on the last day. That's just what Bill Litwin let his daughters do. Bill lives in Highgate, Ontario. Looks like a lot of fun for those two. Coming up in just a few minutes, we're going to take a look at your national forecast for the week. Clinton?
Introducing Farm Journal TV, on demand 24/7. AgDay, Machinery Pete TV. U.S. Farm Report on your phone and tablet. Download the Farm Journal TV mobile app today.
With prevent plant dates looming, we dive into the soybean market. That's next in analysis, and later a virtually deserted island and all the food you can imagine. Well, it's become a cow's dream. Coming up on AgDay.
Closed captioning is brought to you by BASF. Grow smart with BASF. We create chemistry.
Corn continuing to rally with the July contract pushing above the psychologically significant 450 level for the first time in 5 years on Friday. Here's an update from the CME.
Today in the grain markets, soybeans was a little bit higher. It seems that there's many acres that are still unplanted. The USDA is expected on Monday to report that planting is only 85% complete, leaving 12+ million acres to go. That's really a recipe to underpin some of these rallies in the futures. I know that there's a lot of bearish news for soybeans without this Chinese trade deal ahead, but finally we've got a little something to get it off the ground. The corn also made new highs. It's breaking through big resistance numbers, and it has some upside momentum that's building, and it's really catching the attention across the complex. Let's say that we've caught, like a lot of the ethanol buyers, sleeping right now, and they haven't got all the corn that they actually needed, and so by them stepping into the market as well continues to drive it higher. Interestingly enough, as the grains are making new highs, traders are seriously worried about the high price and low quality of feed, and it will have long-term effects on these markets. So the feeders were lower than the live cattle markets, and I think that they are leading the way down if we don't get any kind of an uptick in the market. The grilling season was a little bit delayed. We do have wild weather ahead. Maybe that will give us a little more of domestic demand and start to move this market higher.
Naomi Bloom with Stuart Peterson, our guest here today. And Naomi, as we've been talking about corn, that market's been pretty dynamic, but soybeans have not fallen apart despite a pretty neutral report from USDA on Tuesday.
Yeah, the USDA did no major changes really at all to production by any means. Of course, the export number was reduced, but we've been looking for that.
Sure.
So soybeans have been really consolidating overall in a trading price point range. And like I've been telling my clients, well, I can tell you 5 reasons why prices could go up. I can tell you 5 reasons why they could go crashing lower yet. So going forward, I think the biggest thing to remember is that we are at or coming up to some really important prevent plant dates for a good part of the country. And with over a third of that crop not on the ground yet, there's a lot of important decisions that have to be made. Will the producers be willing to take it beyond those prevent plant dates to get the crop in the ground or not? And the biggest thing right now to remember is that the trade is expecting that every single one of those acres is going to get planted, and they're expecting that even more is going to be planted from a switch from corn acres into soybean acres.
Sure, right.
What if it doesn't happen? What if that doesn't happen? That would be the surprise in all of this. We already know that ending stocks are going to be at 1 billion bushels. That's not a big surprise by any means, but in order to really get ending stocks to decline, what we need to have happen is more than 2 million acres taken off and yield to come down 2 or 3 bushels as we go forward. If that happens, then we have ending stocks closer to like 750 million.
Okay.
Which is still a big number, historically
it
speaking.
Is, right.
Yeah. So in order to see high price beans, you have to have really a continued weather issue with the corn complex to push the corn prices higher. Otherwise, soybeans might be stuck here for a little bit. But if the November contract can get above $9.25, that opens the way higher to $10 futures. But that might be the best gift that we've had in a long time.
Yeah, and we'll be watching USDA in July to see if they start to make any adjustments, right?
Absolutely. That's what they said that they were going to be doing in July report. But will the adjustments be less acres or more acres? We'll have to wait until then to find out.
Absolutely. We'll be watching closely. Thank you so much, Naomi. We'll be back with more AgDay here in just a minute.
To discuss marketing strategies, call 800-334-9779 or visit stuartpeterson.com. Your next piece of equipment is on machinerypete.com. Search equipment from dealerships across the country to find what you're looking for. Only on machinerypete.com.
Welcome back to AgDay. Your meteorologist Cindy Clausen looking at rainfall over the past week, and really that southeast corner getting a little rain this week.
Yeah, that really has been the focus over the past 7 days or so, and that's one of the areas that's actually been a little bit dry, so this isn't a horrible thing. Let's take a look. One of the other areas that had a fair amount of rainfall this week is in the Central Plains, where we've had several spots with 1, 2 to up to 3 inches or so. Just again, the estimated rainfall. Also up in parts of northwestern Minnesota, far northeastern North Dakota. But it's really the southeast that takes the focus of rainfall over the last week, especially over Florida. And you can see in Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, even southern Virginia. Now, some of these areas have been a bit dry lately, so a little bit of rainfall isn't too bad. You just don't want too much all at once. Let's take a look at our jet stream as we head through the week, and we're going to start off with fairly zonal flow, especially for the eastern part of the country, with some warmer temperatures in play. As we head through the week, again, zonal flow, but watch what happens as we get into the latter part of the week. We start to see a trough digging into the west, a little one digging into the northeast, but fairly warm conditions for the nation's midsection. Into the weekend, we see that trough digging further into the west, warming up in the eastern United States, and another low heading over towards the Pacific Northwest. As far as temperatures are concerned, overall, we're looking at slightly below normal temperatures from the Great Lakes to the northern plains, even down into the Four Corners region, but we're looking at some warm temperatures all along a lot of the eastern seaboard anyway, along the Gulf Coast states and into parts of the southwest. Precipitation-wise, it's looking still on the wet side for much of the northeast, Great Lakes all the way down to the central Gulf states and through a good portion of the plains. The dry weather should be around Florida, especially the northern part of Florida, right along southwestern Texas into the southern parts of the Four Corners region and into the Pacific Northwest. Now, over the next 30 days, cooler than normal temperatures, not necessarily a good thing for corn and soybean growers. If you got the plant in the ground, you want those nice warm temperatures, right? Well, it looks like we might be a little on the cool side there, but flooding also helps to contribute to that. Warm in the southeast, also warm along the west coast. And as far as precipitation goes over the next 30 days, a little bit wet in the southeast and into the southern and central plains over towards the Rockies, a little bit on the dry side right along the northwestern tier of states. That's a look at your national forecast. Now here's the weather where you live. Drain, Oregon, lots of sunshine for you today with a high of 82 degrees. Webster, South Dakota, partly cloudy, a high of 69 degrees. And Taneytown, Maryland, showers and thunderstorms with a high of 86.
Coming up, celebrating the green, Machinery Pete in his element at this year's first ever Classic Green reunion. That's next. This morning, Machinery Pete is hitting the road in search of the best deals for you.
Hey folks, reporting in the field this week from the first ever Classic Green reunion event out in Grand Island, Nebraska. And I got four-wheel drive tractors on my mind, standing next to a beautiful original John Deere 8020 owned by Lee Potter of Wilcox, Nebraska. Now Lee actually has 2 of them here at the event, and I think Deere only made like 100 of these things. Now I remember about 10 years ago, back in October of 2010, we saw one sold for $90,000 on a farm auction in Saskatchewan, and everyone thought, $90,000, that's ridiculous. But of course, the last few years we know what's happened. We've actually seen 8020s sold for $160,000, and March 30th this year for $178,500 at the Mecum auction in Iowa. Now last Wednesday, on a farm auction in northwest North Dakota, talk about a rare four-wheel drive, we saw this 1968 Steiger 2200 Barn Series tractor, salvage condition, sold for $13,000. And one more four-wheel drive for you folks. Tomorrow, Tuesday, Farm Estate online auction in Beardsley, Minnesota, a 1992 John Deere 8560, 865 hours on it.
All right, thanks, Greg. Now, cows on a remote island. It's not something from Survivor. What they're doing that's so important for the future of another species. Next.
In the Country is powered by Kawasaki. Let the good times roll.
How does this sound? A remote island with hardly anyone around and all the food you can eat. It's the reality for 13 cows on Gabo Island off the coast of Australia. The cows were brought to the island to feed on an invasive species of grass called kikuyu. The grass was first transplanted onto the island in the 70s to create an airstrip for planes to land, but the plant has taken over. leaving the local penguins with no access to their burrows, making them vulnerable above ground. And that's where the cows come in, munching to their heart's delight and helping the penguins find their way home. Well, that doesn't sound like too bad a way to go. That's all the time we have this morning. We're sure glad you tuned in. It's been part of your day with us. From all of us here at AgDay, I'm Clinton Griffiths. Have a great day.
Closed captioning is brought to you by BASF. Grow smart with BASF. We create chemistry.